Let's sit nice and tall. Let's close the eyes. And just come into a few moments of mindful presence. Paying attention to what you're carrying with you today, physically, mentally, emotionally. At least being aware of what's obvious. So many underlying tendencies and conditions that we are not aware of because they're not obvious. They're not easily discovered. So just look for what's obvious. And whatever you find, don't judge. Don't say, oh man, not that again. Whatever you find, cradle it with intention. Together we will heal. Together we will grow. Together we will do the work so that we are free, more free, more peaceful, more patient, more kind, more present. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in Om. Take a breath in. Om. Asato ma satgamaya. Tamasoma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is, and draw the face to center, release the hands and welcome. And so that mantra, which translates as from the unreal to the real, from the darkness to the light, from death to immortality. May we be led in that direction. Bless you. And in order to be led, in order to follow, in order to feel the calling and answer that calling, which comes from the very core of our being, we have to have some kind of clarity, some awareness that is actual, that is clear, that's unencumbered by doubt, unencumbered by guilt, unencumbered even by human logic, right? Because logic can be flawed too. A certain kind of a clarity which is unquestioned. Because otherwise, every step that we take to our own awakening, to our own self-realization is going to be filled with, is this really happening? Am I really experiencing this? Am I crazy? What's going on? They said this. They said that. This one said that. How do I know? Without clarity, all of those types of experiences derail us. They derail us from the spiritual work that we're here to potentially engage in. And so what is clarity? What is clarity? It's to be clear. Is to be clear in our intention, to be clear in our goal, to be clear in our process, to be clear in our expectation. Take that with a grain of salt, because I don't mean it quite the way you might think. To be clear in our understanding of ourself, of our human self, and of our human tendencies. So let's look at expectation first. I mean, like, what does it mean to be clear about our expectations? Well, A, you have them. Okay, so stop saying you don't. Okay, every single person in this room has expectations. I expect to heal from this knee. Okay, we all have them. So stop saying you don't have expectations. But we do like to say that. We like in our spiritual bubbles today to say, I have totally given up expectations. I'm just going to leave them to fail at their own devices. Leaving them to fail at their own devices is an expectation. Sorry, but it is. So we do have expectations. And so understanding that, and then doing the work to recognize the hypocrisy of our own words and the presence of our own expectations, and then to self-correct. The expectation that we carry through this life, I mean, it gets so out of hand. It's not even, just what we were just talking about, about being in the spiritual bubble and being like, well, I have no expectations of them. I'm just going to leave them to fail at their own, demise. But we expect everything. We expect our food to be cooked a certain way. We expect our families to clean up after themselves. We expect the garden to grow. We expect the day to be, 87 if that's what they reported on the weather. We expect the river to be calm for kayaking. We expect the dog to pee outside. I mean, we have all kinds of expectations. And the moment that any one of those expectations, we expect the grocery store to have our favorite frozen pizza. And then we go to the grocery store and the pizza ain't there. And we're like, the worst dilemma in the world. Oh my God. What am I going to do now? There's no frozen pizza that I like. So we also need to know the impact that these expectations have on us and how silly most of them really are. And how we allow ourselves to get wrapped up in them. So wrapped up that we use them as an excuse to avoid the work, to avoid the practice. You go to the grocery store, they don't have your frozen pizza. It's an ideal moment to practice non-grasping. Silly as it sounds, but it's true. It's like, so what, they don't have your frozen pizza that you were so deeply looking forward to? My grandmother used to say things to me when I was young, like, don't complain about the food on your plate. There's people in the world that don't have food, right? And I would roll my eyes, Nana. She is so right, though, right? She was so right. But me as like a 12-year-old, I'm like, I don't want to eat that, But she was right. There are people in the world that don't have food. So what kind of a person am I cultivating within myself if I'm only ever concerned with what I want, with my expectations about what I should receive in this life? The thing that I'm cultivating within myself is greed. The thing that I'm cultivating within myself is apathy toward other people's suffering. The thing that I'm cultivating within myself is entitlement. Entitlement. And these are things that are antithetical. When they're practiced from an egotistical space, they're things that are antithetical to self-knowledge, like the self-knowledge. They're present, they're very human, they're here for lots of different reasons. One of those reasons is to learn how to work through them so that they're not what is guiding your life. What guides your life can be something that is more clear and less self-centered, less egotistical. But first we have to acknowledge that it's there. There's a movie, I don't remember the name of it, but there's a part in the movie where the priest or whatever he was called. He wasn't called a priest, an abbey maybe. He was sitting there and he was flailing, smacking himself on the back with a little whip-like thing in order to eliminate his desires. And some big famous actor, it wasn't Charlton Heston, but somebody who looks like him, who was playing this role. And it always didn't make sense to me. Because here's this person who is trying to replace one type of grasping with another. Well, every time I have a desirous thought, I'll be violent to myself. And violence is the utmost grasping. Violence is the most damaging grasping to ourself and to all others. It's not the way to clarity. So when you find that you're grasping at something like at the frozen pizza, don't be like that priest. Don't start whipping yourself, hurting yourself, judging yourself, telling yourself bad things about yourself, because it's not going to be supportive and helpful. Instead, as the Buddhists say, acknowledge it. Matter-of-factly, my mind is reacting to this situation. Now, what am I going to do with that? I feel disappointment. But is it disappointment? Does it have substance to it? Or is it based on something else that I'm just not addressing in my life right now? Does my disappointment have a grounding in something else that I need to be looking at? Or am I really just being selfish? And if I'm being selfish, then I'm being selfish. Let me change that now. Let me go and get some food, put it in a bag, and make a donation to people who don't have food. Let me take the opposite action of what it is that my ego is telling my unhealthy, because the ego can be healthy too. What the unhealthy ego is telling me, let me do something opposite to that. Let me apply a medicine of sorts, a tincture, something to help to heal that. And as Swami Shraddhananda was often known to say, that service to alleviate the suffering of others is the fastest way to heal yourself. Not by getting the frozen pizza that you want or getting your way, but to support the alleviation of suffering for other beings. That is the fastest way to heal yourself. So you stand in front of the counter and you say, oh, they don't have what I wanted. I feel the disappointment. The disappointment is real, but is it substantive? Or am I just having kind of a temper tantrum? And if I am, that's fine. That's my tendency. Maybe there's something else there I need to look at. Like, why do I feel such a sense of lack over something so seemingly small? But in the meantime, in order to take a direct action and to become more clear about what my options are and to become more clear about my ability to transcend these egoic tendencies, I am going to march myself on over to Giant, get a bag full of healthy food, and donate it. And I'm going to show myself that I am capable of so much more. How many of you are parents? Right? Did you ever say that to your kid? You're capable of so much more. Why don't you just do it? Right. Something along those lines, though, right? Something along those lines. You're capable of so much more. You have so much more potential than what you're willing to see. If only you would do this. But then we have to step back and say, how clear is that statement actually? Because are you doing it? Are you exercising your potential? Or are you happy enough, sort of in a weird way, to be relegated to the person standing in front of the frozen food aisle saying they don't have my frozen pizza? Are you satisfied there, being the person who feels that they lack rather than becoming the person who is exploring the other options to how they see themselves. We can't tell someone else how to fix themselves. It don't work. The only thing that we can do is our own work. And then maybe by example, they'll be inspired to follow. But if you're not doing, and what you're doing is pointing, then all they're going to see is pointing. And that's the habit that they're going to pick up too. All about expectations, right? So we have to become clear about our expectations, about what they are, when we practice them, or when we feel them, how we feel about them, what they do to us. When they're healthy, we need to acknowledge that too, because expectations are not always unhealthy. Just like the ego is not always unhealthy. I know there are people who will say you must quash and kill the ego. No. You're a human being in a human body. You have this part of your mind that is oriented toward survival and thriving. And that's not a bad thing. After all, you're here to be alive. And you're here to be alive for some substantive period of time so that you can do the work that you're here to do. So you want to kill the thing that's pushing you in that direction of thriving? No, but you do want to train it. I'm not sure I like that word either. Condition it. You want to condition it. You want to condition the ego so that thriving is not a selfish act. It is a communal engagement. It is saying, I can't thrive unless you are also thriving. Your suffering is my suffering. It's the building up of empathy rather than apathy. It's recognizing that I can sit here and say many things to you, but if I'm not in some way, shape, or form engaging those same teachings in my own life, what does it mean? It's just hypocrisy. There's enough of that in the world today. Super important for us to recognize some of these things in our own path and not to critically judge and violently punish ourselves for the ones that we're not practicing, but to just acknowledge and to say, I know I can do better. I know I can. And so I'm going to start seeking ways to do better, to be more present, to think before I speak. And when I speak, to have it be meaningful and not finger pointing. Not finger pointing. Clarity, to be clear about what you're feeling and why, what you're thinking and why, what you're expecting and why, what you're letting go of and why, what you're judging and why, what you're hoping and why. And there's a lot of work there. There's a lot of work. And it's endless work. From the moment you're born till the moment that you die. And then the next life and the next life and the next life. But it doesn't have to be tedious work. Clarity is not a tedious engagement. Did you ever go to a yoga class? And then after the class, you walked outside. And when you walked outside, you were struck by the blue sky and the green leaves on the trees and the green grass and the starkness, the clarity of everything. Did you ever feel that way? Right? Clarity. You saw things that you didn't normally see. You saw more of the bigger picture. And maybe you recognized the bird song, or you saw the children laughing, or you recognized someone crying, and in that moment you connected with them. Maybe you were crying and you connected with yourself. Clarity, being more present. They've tried to study this too. They've tried to study this. They say, why does yoga do what yoga does? Why is it that people leave a yoga class, but it activates this part of the brain, it activates this part of the brain, and it does something over here, does something in the nervous system, but they still can't explain it. They're trying to compartmentalize it and say, this is activated in the brain, and therefore there must be a relationship between this part of the brain and this type of an experience. And that's all well and good and super interesting. I mean, I'm a scientist in my PhD, so I certainly love that kind of research. But the reality is that ain't what it is. It's not what it is. That part of the brain being activated as a result of your yoga practice is a consequence of something else. What is it a consequence of? It's a consequence of the vibrant life energy that already exists within you discovering itself. And that rediscovery is what lights up the brain. The brain doesn't cause the rediscovery. The rediscovery causes the lights to go on. And the rediscovery, the clarity that brings to us, is not a clarity of, I deserve that frozen pizza. It's a clarity of, I am here with purpose. And I am more than happy, joyful even, enthusiastic to fulfill that purpose. I don't need to doubt. I don't need to second guess. I don't need to ask permission. I don't need to worry about what the law tells me. I don't need to worry about other people thinking I'm wrong or I'm right. I don't need to worry about pedestals or dungeons. I don't need to worry about any of that because my purpose is my purpose. And there's nothing that can take that away except me. And there's nothing that can fulfill that except me. Therefore, I am completely self-responsible in that regard. So let me dedicate my time and my energy and my resources and my work and my thoughts and my energy to fulfilling that purpose. It's clear. It's clarity. When we come into even a little bit, clarity of purpose, something magical and amazing happens. We stop pointing fingers. We stop blaming. We stop judging. We stop being as afraid. We stop having so many sensations of lacking. So many thoughts and ideations of greatness or being tossed into the dungeon. Those things, they don't affect us as much. We say they're not in line with my purpose. Why would I give them my energy? That's clarity. They're not in line with my purpose. Why would I give that energy? That's clarity. I will give what is in line with my purpose, my energy, and only that. And so the thought comes into the mind. Well, I'm limited, I'm lacking, I'm this, I'm that. Where's my pizza? You know? And you say, you are not in line with my purpose. So I'm not going to engage. I accept that this is the way I feel in my mind. I accept that there's disappointment there. I'm not going to feed it. I'm not going to feed it. I accept that there's fear there. I'm not going to feed it. I accept that there's something there that can be defined. But I'm not going to feed into it. How do we no longer feed into it? Well, on a little bit of a personal note, I used to suffer from chronic nightmares. So very chronic nightmares based on early life abuses. And literally, I would become paralyzed by these nightmares. Oftentimes I would go into a corner or even into a closet and just kind of sit there until morning broke, until it was light enough that I could see. because I was so paralyzed by these nightmares that I couldn't even get up to turn on the light switch. And there came a point in time where I'm practicing yoga and I'm studying the teachings of yoga and I'm learning about myself, but I'm still having these nightmares. And I'm still feeding them because I'm still in the corner. I'm still under the covers. I'm still going into the closet. I'm still afraid. So there came a point where I had to face them and not run away from them. And I was very fortunate, that at that point in time, the work I had to do myself. But I had a very supportive partner, my husband, Ed, who many of you know. And he would say, whatever you need, I'm here. Whatever you got to do. And I would say, I got to do it. I have to. You can just kind of be there. And if it gets to be too much, then come get me. But it started with, I would wake up in a cold sweat, crying or screaming, and I would stop, and I would gather my breath as best I could, which didn't look pretty, guaranteed. And I would get up and walk to the light switch and turn the light switch on and stand there and gather myself. And from there, it continued to the point where I would get myself up. I would walk to the light switch, but I wouldn't turn it on. I would then open the door and walk down the hall, the dark hall, to prove to myself that there was nothing there, that there was nobody there who was going to hurt me, that there was nothing happening. And this went on for a couple of years. It took a while to break the habit of the night terrors, but I did. And I don't have them anymore. And I haven't had them in many years now. But there was a point in life where they were so pervasive that I had chronic insomnia. And if I was sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night, that was a lot. But I had a choice. And initially I might not have realized that I had that choice, because sometimes we don't realize it. No one ever said it to us, or we never saw somebody overcome it, or we've read only the bad stuff, and the condemning stuff. At some point, there is a moment of opportunity that says you can open this window, you can let in a little bit of fresh air, and you can gain a new perspective, rather than the stale one that you're living by. And it's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be one attempt fixes it all. It's going to be an ongoing process that if you really want to adjust it, you have to commit yourself to. And commitment comes from clarity. Commitment comes from clarity. And in some ways, clarity has a willpower component to it, right? Because commitment has a willpower component to it. So you have to be willing to stand there and take the chance that maybe there really is somebody in the hallway. But it's not likely that there is. So I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to try and see how much control over my own circumstances I can regain. And if there is somebody in the hallway, then I'll deal with it. Right? I won't have a choice. It'll have to be dealt with, one way or another. So what is it in your life that is stealing your clarity, that is taking away from you a clearer picture of your own potential? What is it that you're giving into? What is bringing up for you attachment after attachment after attachment, fear after fear after fear, doubt, loathing, whatever it happens to be? What is it exactly? I've done so much work and I have so much more to do, but I have a really good idea of where a lot of my faults come from. And I don't say faults like I'm condemning myself, like, oh, no, Swamiji, you don't have faults. I'm like, yes, I do. Dear God, we all have them, right? And if you study Ayurveda at all, you know it's true, because the doshas are faults. They are that which can be vitiated, that which can go way out of whack and cause all kinds of issues. And we all have that, right? So there's lots more work to do, have already done lots of work, and have committed to the path of the work, understanding that if it's not the night terrors, it will be something else. Emotional eating, some kind of fear over not having, full recovery of my knee, fear of heights, all kinds of things. I mean, you're never lacking something to do work with. And here's the kicker. The clarity over your own work will be completely impeded the more you're concerned about someone else's work. So if you're sitting there saying, well, why aren't they fixing themselves? Why aren't they doing what they should be doing? Well, then you're not focusing on what you should be doing or could be doing. The more that we externalize, the less clear we become. Because the moment, and there's no justification, the moment that we externalize our attention, we become less clear immediately. Clarity wavers and becomes diminished the moment we externalize our awareness. I can say something like, well, why is that person down the street, waving that flag that represents hate, this, that, and the other thing? And ethically speaking, there's a point there. But when I'm talking about my own purpose in this life and the clarity necessary to fulfill that purpose, to come into my own self-knowledge, I can't sit there and dump energy in that direction, because I'm not going to change that person. That person is the only one who can change that person. And I am the only one who can change me. There's some really amazing interviews with Holocaust survivors. Holocaust survivors who forgave the guards. And they said, if I hold this, if I hate them, if I condemn them, if I do nothing for the rest of my life but curse them, then I will never heal from this. And it's that sentiment saying, the more I externalize out onto others, the less I'm capable of internalizing, and in a positive way, and coming into recollection, reconnection with the inner peace of myself, with the potential of myself. Does that make sense? Yeah. Let's do a time check. Okay. Questions or reflections at this point? Questions or reflections? It's pretty clear, right? Clear, get it? Clarity? Clarity. It doesn't mean it's easy. Yes?
Yeah, and how would you suggest to gain more clarity?
Stop. Somebody asked me one time, they said, how do I stop being angry? I'm like angry at everything. How do I stop that? And I said, well, you see that wall? If you started running from here, which I won't show you, if you started running from here and you didn't want to hit the wall, what would you do? Well, I'd stop running. I said, okay. You got to do the opposite. Do the opposite. So discover what it is that is causing an impediment to your clarity. and change it. Change it. And don't change it by way of like, well, I'm just not going to talk to that person anymore because they're so unclear. No. Maybe stop listening and taking to heart personally what they're saying. Because whatever they're saying, it ain't about you. Even if they like, I love you so much, I hate you so much. It's not about you. That's about their own fear, their own trepidation. It is all actions. It's all karma, right? So pay attention to where your reactions are. Pay attention to where the fingers are pointing in your own life, and then draw those fingers back. Take the actions and bring them back. Take the thoughts and bring them back. Take the energy and bring it back. And just ask yourself, what do I need to be a healthier person? Well, I need to really pay more attention to my food plan, to my time outside in nature, to the amount of time I spend praying and practicing, and do it. Turn off the television. Take time out from your cell phone. Stop engaging in violent conversations with people. Get it off of Facebook. Or at least take a break. There's nothing on Facebook you're going to change. I'm so sorry to tell you that. But you're not, because most times when people are posting on Facebook, they're not posting from a place of clarity. They're posting from a place of fight or flight. They want to fight with you or they want to flee. Period. That's it. Or they want to freeze. But they don't want to be friends. They want you on their friend list, as long as you agree. This is not everybody, but it is the predominant attitude on Facebook right now. So get off of Facebook for a while. Take a Facebook vacation. Internalize your energy. Rein it in. Bring it back to yourself. And then start applying it, dishing it out into the areas that you need. And not because these people are all wrong and these people are all wrong and I'm right. No. But for the simple reason of, if I continue to externalize my energy, if I make that choice, then I will not have the energy to come to know myself and my own potential. 100% self-responsibility in that. Michelle, I know you wanted to say something.
You had said just a little bit ago, do you notice how when you leave yoga class, sometimes everything's brighter? And that's the first thing I thought when you said that was, and then of course you just explained all that in a different way. But just taking the time to be quiet and still and meditate allows us to see things more clearly, I think.
Yeah.
So, and all those examples you shared.
A couple of weeks ago, I brought up one of my favorite movies, Phenomenon, with John Travolta. Love that movie. Anybody watch it after we had the conversation? So good. So good. And, like the premise there, he's got a brain tumor and he's got these abilities that basically came from this tumor, these abilities. But aside from all of that, there's one scene in the movie where he's sitting on his back porch and his beloved comes to him and she's like, what's going on? Are you okay? And he's like, shh. Just listen. Can you hear them? Do you hear them? And she's looking at him like, oh. And he points out and he says, the trees. They're talking. They're communicating. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it was one of the most beautiful moments in a movie that I thought they captured so exquisitely about what happens when we stop. When we stop externalizing all that energy and throwing it out we actually begin to see. To see. And we can see with clarity rather than judgment. We can see with empathy rather than apathy. We can see with appreciative inspiration rather than jealousy. We can see. And that's what the yoga does. And that's what the yoga is. Because that's where the expression and experience of oneness comes from. It's not that the brain is making you feel that way. It's that you've recovered something within yourself through the redirection of energy, the reinvestment of it. And that reinvestment has ignited your brain. It has crossed over that barrier, and it has inspired your brain in that one moment to want more. And that's a very crucial moment, because when most people have that experience, they'll get in their car, start the car, drive away, and curse at the guy who runs the stop sign in front of them.
Versus compassion for the guy.
Right. So in that moment where your brain is firing because you've had this rediscovery of this essence of yourself, of this potential that you always have, don't walk away from it. Be with it. Stay with it. No matter what's happening around you. Let your brain become so satiated by it that it becomes what it craves. Swami Satchidananda said, in yoga we say a lot of the time, you shouldn't have goals, no expectation to the outcome. But if you were going to grasp onto any one thing, let it be your inner peace. Let it be peace. Grasp that by only peaceful means. And then your life will become something that you have not even begun to imagine. Not even begun. Because when you are peace, what is there to be afraid of? When you yourself are experiencing peace, the peace that is you, what is there to be jealous of, to be envious of, to be hateful of, to be judgmental of? What is there to be any of that to? There isn't. Yes?
Sure. It's a thought or a question, I don't know yet, but there's something in my mind.
Yeah.
In regards to if you're in a conversation and it feels harsh or violent, I'm trying to think turning that energy inward. I guess what would that look like? Just not responding or coming in from compassion, or I'm kind of processing that, how to manage a situation like that.
Absolutely. And so many times people fall into the kind of unhealthy ego trap. They're having a conversation with someone and the person says something that is, maybe violent or incorrect politically or whatever it happens to be, insensitive maybe. And out of all the goodness of our heart, we say to them, well, you're wrong. And then their defenses go up. And then your defenses go up, and pretty soon that piece is shot. So there is a way to bring correct information in. There is a way to bring ethical information in without telling people they're wrong. Because looking at someone and saying you're wrong is automatically going to bring about a defensive reaction. It just does. It's part of our emotional makeup. I always think back to this friend of mine. His name is Andy, and he's part of a duet. And they do a lot of spiritual music, and really beautiful musicians from New Jersey. And he's a great person, no problems there. He had this really fun and interesting way of ending a conversation. It didn't have to be a negative conversation. It was just time to go. But aren't you oftentimes kind of reticent about that too? Well, I got to get out of this conversation. It's getting, how do I leave? Well, we're standing in our old school on the stairs, and he's kind of by the door, and his wife is there next to him, Abby and Andy. And I'm standing on the stairs here, and Ed stands 3 stairs. Then Ed's over here on the stairs, and we're talking and we're laughing and everything. And there was a pause. And in the pause, he goes, well, I just felt within myself that it's time for me to exit. Much love to you all. See you soon. And I sat there. And I had to giggle because, the ego's did he just say this conversation was boring? Or did he just really, in a real kind, beautiful way, say it's time for me to go? And so he went. And it didn't hurt anybody, right? So So there's a way. There is a way. You have to find your words, of course, to exit a conversation. There's a way to exit a relationship, which doesn't include hammering the other person down, down, down. That allows you to leave in the light of love and peace and good intention. There's a way to bring correct energy within information forward also. And it's not, well, if only you would do this, if only you would think the way I think. No, it's someone says something separatist. One of the things that I might respond with is, really when it comes down to it, I choose to believe that each and every one of us really just wants to see every other one of us happy and free from suffering. Those are the teachings that I espouse. Those are the teachings I adhere to. Period. I abide by the teachings that I've dedicated myself to as best I can. And they are what inform me. So I don't look at someone and say, well, I'm going to tell you. Because I'm not going to tell you. I don't have to tell you. The Bhagavad Gita tells you. The Bible tells you, if you're reading it properly. And not interpreting it to be hurtful. The Quran. All of these very inspired, teachings. Even when they appear to have a sense of violence to them, you have to go beyond the human tendency to identify that which we should be afraid of and go beyond that. Because the Bible isn't telling you to go kill people in the name of God. It's not. The Bhagavad Gita isn't telling you that either. Neither is the Quran. As a matter of fact, in the Quran it says, the man who would harm his neighbor in my name is not a true practitioner. But the one who feeds the neighbor, cares for the neighbor, nurtures the neighbor, supports the end of suffering, that's a true practitioner. Human words are flawed. They always are. And when we look at teachings like what the Bible shares with us, what the Quran or any other text shares with us, even what the Bhagavad Gita shares with us, there's always going to be something to look at and say, why does it say that? When the question should be, why am I interpreting it in a hateful way? Why am I interpreting it to be violence? Why am I interpreting it that way? Why is anybody interpreting it that way? Isn't there always multiple ways to look at things? And some people say in the Bhagavad Gita, it's an actual history. It's a recollection of something that actually happened, that Krishna was on the battlefield, had this conversation with Arjuna in the middle of the field. And some people say it's an intellectual discussion. Some people say it's simply a teaching tool. And some people say it's a psychological battle that happens within each of us alone. And then between us together. But first, it's our own inner battle. So you pick which one you want to follow. And if you pick the one that says that the Bhagavad Gita supports war, then, hey, violence will be what you find. Isn't that interesting? The way you choose to define it is what it will bring to you. And if you choose to define it as a weapon of violence, then it will bring violence. Because that's all you'll end up seeing. But if you choose to see it as a teaching of peace and of unity, then that's what it will bring to you. And I don't know about you, but I kind of think that the peace and unity is more conducive to clarity and to healing and, to being inspired in this life. Yeah? Any other questions or reflections? Did I address what you were?
Yeah, thank you
Okay.
very much.
Sometimes I go, as you all know, I go off on these tangents and I'm like, I think I'm still there.
Very helpful.
Any other thoughts or reflections right now? We're good? Okay. So we'll end there for today. At 12:30, we have the women's circle today, and that's going to be in the library down the other end. And between now and then, they are serving brunch, so if you haven't had any, please do indulge and enjoy. If you're going about the rest of your day today, I pray that you travel safely. Be clear. Be clear in yourself. Find your inner anchor and stay with that. And don't let anyone or anything or any thought cast a shadow of a doubt that you have a purpose in this life, and that purpose is self-knowledge. You have a purpose in this life, and that purpose is also service to the alleviation of suffering. You have a purpose in this life, and that purpose is the realization or the remembrance of unity. And those are really not three different things. They're all the same. We just put different words to them. So let's sit tall. We'll close the eyes. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in Om and the All Beings mantra. Taking a breath in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Now and always honoring your light, the light of all beings everywhere. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you all so much for being here today. So good to gather with you, to share the light of these teachings. And I'll see some of you in the women's circle, and I'll see some of you next week. Enjoy. Thank you.